I made a video earlier this week on the Bulls' 3 and number 7 draft picks from the 2017 to 2019 drafts and discussed which of these 3 draft picks had the most future potential and would have the biggest impact on the court. And I also asked you guys in a community poll between the 3 players which one you felt had the most potential between Coby White, Wendell Carter Jr., and Lauri Markkanen, the 3 players selected number 7 in their respective seasons. I'll leave a link into the video in the description as well as in the upper right corner in case you guys missed it. But in that video, I also talked about how I wouldn't be treating this as a who we should have drafted scenario over these 3 guys because obviously we can't hop into a DeLorean and go back in time and try to revise history. But what if we could go back in time and revise history and make different selections for each of these 3 number 7 picks, and how might that impact the team's success today? Of course, in hindsight, there is always someone else we wish we would have drafted, and that's why hindsight is 2020, because otherwise we would have made those selections. Yet another reason why I always say the NBA is a bit of a crapshoot, because you'll have multiple teams pass up on a franchise-changing player, not realizing how good they would become, or the opposite, picking one thinking that they're the answer, and they end up being a bust. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Before I get into the video, as you know, we are in the middle of the All-Star break, and we will not be seeing a Bulls game until next Thursday, when they'll be taking on the Philadelphia 76ers. So with that long break and it being mid-season, I figured I'd do a mid-season check-in on this channel. If you saw my community post yesterday, I had asked any and all feedback from you guys on the channel and any things you would like to see differently. One of the questions I had was whether to keep the music background, and based on the results, it looks like I'll be keeping it for now, but I'll likely start switching things up here at some point. But keep in mind, I do not do this full-time. I do have a full-time job and a little toddler at home, so as much as I'd like to make this much more professional and advanced, it's not always practical given the limited time that I have, but who knows, maybe one day I'll be lucky enough to do this full time. We'll see. For now, it's just a hobby of mine that I very much enjoy, and of course I appreciate you guys for supporting the channel as well. So like I said, let me know if you have any feedback or changes you guys want to see from this channel, and I'll see what I can do as far as making those changes and making the channel more fun and engaging. But that aside, let's get into this topic, because honestly, one of my favorite things to do is speculate on what could have been in sports and rewriting history. I've done a few revising history videos on the channel, like what would have happened if Rose had never gotten injured, but I don't do it that often because really the focus should be on our current Bulls roster and how the team has been progressing. But for today, let's take a quick trip down memory lane and see what might have been if we had picked just a little differently at number 7 in those 3 NBA drafts. So as I'm sure you'll all remember, on NBA draft night in 2017, the Bulls front office pulled the trigger and signaled a rebuild when they decided to trade away Jimmy Butler to the Minnesota Timberwolves for Zach Lavine, Chris Dunn, and the number 7 draft pick, which the Bulls used to select Lauri Markkanen. Now, initially, after the end of the 2017-18 season, it had looked like drafting Markkanen was one of the steals of the draft, really, because if you remember, guys like Markelle Fultz, Lonzo Ball, Josh Jackson, Jonathan Isaac, they had all been selected before Lauri. Jason Tatum was obviously great, and even though De'Aaron Fox has improved significantly and looking to be a future All-Star, Markkanen did have a better rookie season than he did, so it could be argued that after the completion of that season, and if the draft could have been redrafted, Markkanen likely would have gone top 3 or 4. But fast forward a few years to where we are now, and Markkanen, although I still believe is a great player and with a lot more upside potential, has struggled to develop his game and of course has had issues staying healthy. So given what we now know, and if we could redo our number 7 pick in that NBA draft, based on the players still available, assuming the first 6 go as is, and I'll put up the 2017 draft results so you can see who went after Lauri. And if the Bulls front office, if I'm the Bulls front office, I'm selecting Donovan Mitchell with the number 7 pick. Now, obviously, as Bulls fans, we look at this and think, why the heck did we not draft Mitchell knowing the player that he's become today? But to be fair, there were a lot of other teams who passed up on Mitchell as well, as you can see. He went number 13 overall for a guy who probably should have gone number 1 or number 2 next to Jason Tatum. But by the Bulls drafting Donovan Mitchell, this gives them, in my opinion, a future superstar in the making. The guy is leading the Utah Jazz to the best record in the NBA. He's already a 2-time All-Star. He's a very effective and efficient scorer. Even in his rookie season, he was averaging over 20 points per game. Currently, he's averaging 24.4, 5.4 assists, and 4.6 rebounds to go along with a steal per game. And unlike Markkanen, he's been able to stay healthy. Now, I know some of you might be asking, well, there's a problem with getting Mitchell because he conflicts with Zach Lavine since they both play the 2. And I'll get to that in a sec because I do think Lavine is more than capable to play the 3. He's even been able to play the point at times. But we'll hold off on that for now, as even in that season, Zach was out most of the year recovering from an ACL injury. So adding Donovan Mitchell, that gives you a starting lineup, again, at the time, Chris Dunn, Mitchell, Justin Holiday, and then, of course, Zach Lavine when he came back, Mirotic at the 4, and then Robin Lopez at center. Now, I know that by drafting Donovan Mitchell, that this could have impacted their record, which means it could have impacted their lottery chances, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to just say the Bulls remain at the number 7 spot for simplicity's sake, because the Bulls actually got unlucky in falling to number 7 in 2018. So even their record, even if it was worse or better, there could have been a number of different spots they could have landed depending on how the ping pong balls fell. Now for the 2018 NBA draft, the Bulls used the number 7 pick to select Wendell Carter Jr., who really appeared to be the best available at the time, although he really didn't fit the Bulls roster all that well when drafting Markkanen the prior season. But Wendell has been decent for the Bulls, so I wouldn't say it was a horrible pick based on who was available and on the board at the time, but there were a couple notables who, based on their play now, should have been selected over Wendell, and 2 I really have my eye on are ShaiGilgesAlexander and Michael Porter Jr. Now, as much as I love Michael Porter Jr., I remember in that draft thinking, I really hope he falls to the number 7 pick because of all the injury concerns around him, and that the Bulls should take a chance if he doesn't, in fact fall that low, because he initially was selected to be a top 3 pick coming out of high school. And of course, I should have known Garpax would have taken the safe route, and they drafted Wendell instead, although to be fair, a lot of teams after the Bulls passed up on MPJ, given he was the last pick in the lottery at number 14, selected by Arturas Karnisovas in the Denver Nuggets. But even with all of that, I still think MPJ is a phenomenal athlete, that he's a potential to be a star in this league. His injuries do still concern me a bit. And on top of that, if we were to take Michael Porter Jr. and we had Donovan Mitchell, you're kind of putting Zach to the side, given MPJ is mainly a small forward. If you move Lavine to the 3, and then by also having Donovan Mitchell at the shooting guard, that makes it challenging. So instead, I'm going to go ahead and take ShaiGilgesAlexander with the number 7 pick because he's a combo guard that is great at the point and has significantly improved year after year since he's been in the league. I mean, you could argue he was snubbed from the All-Star game this season, averaging 23.2 points per game, 5.3 rebounds, and 6.3 assists, shooting over 41% from 3, 51% from the field. He has a PER of 22.2, and the guy is only 22 years old. Now, I wouldn't say he's an incredible playmaker. He's definitely better than Coby White in the playmaking department, but I don't know if, it entirely solves the Bulls' playmaking issues they have currently. But between SGA at the point, Donovan Mitchell at the 2, and Lavine at the 3, I've got to think that although none of them are necessarily playmakers, quote unquote, they're all very good at moving a basketball, decent court vision, but also creating their own shots. Defense might still be a bit of a question mark, but SGA is actually shown to be a decent defender on the perimeter. And then finally, the Bulls would likely be a little empty at the power forward point since Mirotic would have been traded in this instance, and we wouldn't have drafted Markkanen. So likely Bobby Portis would start at power forward, even though the Bulls would trade him mid-season that year, and then of course Robin Lopez at center. So now going into the 2019 draft, we're assuming the Bulls get the number 7 pick. And the first 6 picks go as they did. And of course, the Bulls use this number 7 selection to take Coby White. I mean, honestly, if you look at the 2019 draft class, there was a reason this was really top heavy in terms of the draft. I mean, outside of Zion and John Morant, there isn't much that jumps out at you to say that that was an incredible steal that the Bulls got at number 7. Granted, this is only the second season for this draft class, so there is still time for some guys to start breaking out, and as we all hope to see from Coby. The only guy that really jumps out at me as having been somewhat of a steal of a pick is Tyler Hero, and even he's been okay so far this season. Now, looking at the guys who were available at the time where the Bulls were on the clock for the 7th pick, and then also keeping in mind what the Bulls' need would be given the fact that they had drafted Donovan Mitchell and SGA from the prior 2 drafts, the Bulls would need a big man. Because looking at this list, Tyler Hero probably does make the most sense, but he wouldn't fit the need the Bulls would be looking for at that point. And I feel most people probably aren't going to like this one, although maybe things did change a little bit after we got to see him play last night. But I'm actually really high on this kid, and that is Jaxson Hayes. And the reason I like Jaxson Hayes is because he's a true center. A little thin, so that's a bit of a concern. He's 6'11", 220 pounds, but the hope is he'll bulk up a bit as he's only 20 years old. He's actually a very athletic big. He had a solid rookie season for the Pelicans. Now, he wasn't really, shown out that well this year, partly because of the fact that the Pelicans traded for Steven Adams, so he's taken away a lot of those minutes and touches that Hayes saw in his rookie year. And because of his limited minutes, when you look at his per 36 minutes numbers, they're actually pretty impressive, averaging 15 points per game, 9 rebounds, and 1.7 blocks, again, per 36 minute stats. Hayes does need to work on, work better on committing fouls. Part of the reason why he doesn't see as many minutes is because he often finds himself getting into foul trouble. But again, he's young. Hopefully, he'll be able to learn and get better at that. The other thing I like about Hayes is his energy on the floor. I mean, for his flaws as far as getting into trouble, foul trouble, the dude hustles, is scrappy on the floor. He's an incredible shot blocker. So I think the talent is there, the skill will come, and the energy he has right now will be a good driving force for the rest of the team to feed off of that. So with that leaves us with ShaiGilgesAlexander at the point, Donovan Mitchell at shooting guard, Zach Lavine at the small forward, and then assuming, we still take Patrick Williams in the following draft, he would be our power forward, and then finally Jaxson Hayes at center. I mean, that's a pretty solid starting lineup, and a very young starting lineup, I might add, with even more upside potential. The offense would be on fire when you have 3 guys that can easily score over 20 points per game in SGA, Mitchell, and Lavine. And then you add a front court of Patrick Williams and Hayes, big men that are both athletic, young, and with potential, both pretty good defenders. Obviously Jaxson Hayes still needs to work a little bit on that department. I know he's a good shot blocker, but there's a lot of other aspects of his defense that needs to be focused on. So in my view, in this, incredibly hypothetical revisionist scenario, this is a pretty solid team. Granted, I didn't cover the bench, and obviously the bench would need some solid defenders since the starting 5 outside of P. Will and a little bit of Jaxson Hayes aren't really known for their defense. And this lineup isn't perfect by any means, but the guys are also young and would hopefully develop even further into high caliber contending players that would eventually translate into a high caliber contending team for a championship. It just goes to show that even small changes in the decision of who you draft can shape the direction of your franchise, and you never really know what player turns into a star until after the fact. Obviously, guys, this is all incredibly hypothetical, and of course it's easy for me to say we should have drafted Donovan Mitchell over Markkanen as an example when it's 3 years later, when no one expected Donovan to break out in the way that he did. So all of that, I know this, it's just for fun to see what the Bulls team would have looked like now knowing how some of these draft prospects turned out in the NBA. And of course, all of them still have room to grow in the league. What do you guys think though? What would you have done differently with those 3 number 7 picks, knowing the players that were on the board and available to be selected for those 3 draft classes? Let me know in the comments for what you would do, who you would have selected for each of those 3 picks. As always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan as I post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.